folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mason Ziegler. And friend, thanks for joining me here today. And I have another good one for you. I'm having these conversations with other flower farmers, and I just think it's enlightening to me. And I am a seasoned flower farmer that actually knows these people. And I'm just getting all these little juicy nuggets. And today is another one that's full of it. I am talking with Jennie Love about basically the evolution of a flower farming business and how things change and evolve and how good that is and how hard it is sometimes for us to not feel like that we're a failure or we've made a mistake because we're changing. Because the reality is that's the secret sauce, y'all, to a great business for longevity, for life and in business. And so I am talking with Jennie about her humble beginnings from a community garden that then moved to two community garden plots. And then getting her land and her kind of journey, and y'all just kind of the steps and trials and things you go through and where she is today. So let's just take a listen as I discuss the evolution of a flower farming business with Jennie Love of Love and Fresh Flowers, located in Philadelphia. She is a farmer-florist, one of the leading in the industry, actually a pioneer of that. And let's listen in. Hey, Jennie Love.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for joining me again here today to talk business.
Oh, yeah. It's always my favorite subject. I can never have enough to say about it.
Well, and you know what does it? And that's the whole point of this podcast, friends, is the evolution of business. And I thought Jennie, kind of like me, where we started however many years ago is so different today. I mean, how'd we get here, right? Where we started from is not where we thought we were going.
Right, exactly.
You know, so I just thought this would be a great conversation for us to have about kind of the evolution of a flower farm, opportunities, kind of, I think it'll be inspiring for people to hear what your start was like and kind of what you've done through the years. And, so let's just have that chat. And I do remember how fascinated I was actually when I watched, or actually I was sitting outside the door while you were recording your online course for Farmer-Florist school about your start. And I never knew that you started in a community garden.
Oh, yeah. Well, those were the days. So I started, well, I guess I'll just go real quick back to the very beginning. I grew up on a dairy farm in central Pennsylvania and then decided, when I was like 15, like every other farm kid, that I never wanted to farm again because why the heck would you do that? And so I hightailed it to the city. I got a degree in communications and world literature and eventually in business development too. And just was all in it to the corporate world. I thought, this is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to make like 80 grand a year. It's going to be great. I'll be able to go on fancy vacations. I'll love my life. And then it turned out that, well, like everybody else, corporate America kind of is unfulfilling. Let's just say that. That's a nice way to put it. Disappointing. And so then I decided I wanted to get back into farming, but I really enjoyed living in Philadelphia. I enjoyed an urban environment. I did not want to go back to a super rural location. And so with that, I was left to try to figure out how to farm in a city. And there wasn't a lot of land, shocking, I know, but there was a community garden that I was able to get a plot in. So I started with a 20-foot by 40-foot space in the community garden. And from there, I grew enough flowers to go to a farmer's market that first year. And at the next year, and I sold well there. And the next year, I added another community garden plot of 20 by 40, and I thought I was the big time. I was also an ASCFG member, and I was going to ASCFG conferences and asking crazy questions like, can I grow flowers and do weddings with the flowers that I grow? And everybody was like, you're nuts. But I was asked to do wedding flowers at the farmer's market. Like a customer asked me to do wedding flowers, and I started doing wedding flowers. And then I realized that weddings are going to be far more lucrative than farmers markets. And I shifted my focus and started looking much harder for land because I needed more land if I was going to do weddings. So after 2 years, I ended up on an acre of beautiful land that I could use. And then the next year added another acre off of that. And both of those were rented properties. And I grew my business exponentially once I got a hold of that land. But yeah, I started on a very small and very humble community garden plot.
It's because nobody really comes out of the gate, okay, I've got, 4 acres of open land and I'm going to be a flower farmer. I think that most of us kind of come through the back door, wouldn't you say?
I think too, there are people that have a lot of land who are farmers already of maybe grain crops or, truck farming, vegetable stuff. And they do have a ton of land and they get super enthusiastic about adding lots of space, but flowers are so much more complicated than a lot of other things that people may have grown before. And I do think it's very important to start smaller. I know you teach that all the time, and I preach that as well. So starting in a community garden plot was not a bad thing. I wanted more land, but it was probably really, really valuable that I didn't have access to more land. So I could really hone in on my skills from the beginning.
Yeah, so let's just pause and say it again. Start small, folks.
Yeah, even if you have 10 acres, don't put 9.5 acres in cover crop and do a half acre, and that's your first season. And then maybe in the second season you go up to an acre, but don't do more than half an acre that first year.
Oh my goodness. I mean, people just really don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
How much you can produce from a very small space, but worse than that, you got to figure out how to farm.
Well, you got to figure out how to sell it.
Yes.
I'm sorry, there's no point in growing 9 acres of flowers if you have no market. So why grow it if it's just going to sit there and go in the compost pile? So yeah, definitely go smaller.
It's really, really true. And it perpetuates itself. If you get overwhelmed, then you're really not learning anything. I mean, and wouldn't you just attribute, this is about the evolution of business. I mean, isn't that a lesson that it's kind of like your parents trying to warn you about something that they see you heading, you heading to the fire, but nothing they say will stop you from having to test. You got to sizzle your finger or your nose yourself. And I think that that's really, really true with a lot of people because, I have evolved around and gone, I started out really small, then I got bigger and bigger. I mean, my whole property is only 3 acres, but I had engulfed every square inch that I could in production. But now I'm back to squeezing it smaller and smaller and smaller.
Right.
So, just the rabbit hole of, I can tell you, I can get a lot more out of a half an acre when it's the only half an acre. But when you give me 3 half an acres, you're not nearly as efficient as.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the part we don't figure out. Somebody says to their self, nobody I know, right? I'm telling for a friend. You think, oh, wow, if I'm grossing XYZ on a half an acre, good grief, 3 times that, that's what I'm doing.
Right.
Doesn't work that way.
It does not. Nope. You get spread thin. And then you also, the more growing you're doing, the less business you're doing. And that, like, you have to wear multiple hats unless you're one of those lucky people that can afford lots of help right from the beginning. But in the beginning, you've got to do so many things. And if you're trying to grow a lot of stuff, then you don't have time to do all the super important business things that are just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the number of stems that you're growing. So I think our industry gets so caught up in volume of production, and I really cringe when I see that, because that is detrimental to the long-term health of your business and frankly, the long-term health of the person. That is where burnout happens over and over again. And we lose people to burnout all the time because of that.
All right. So let's paint this picture. So you started, do we call it farming when you had one plot? Yes, we do, because you were selling the flowers.
Technically, yep. The USDA defines a farm by if you sell $1,000 worth of what you grow. So I was selling quite a lot more than $1,000.
Yep. So there you go. So you start out as an aspiring flower farmer. You have a couple of plots. Then you're able to secure 2 separate pieces of land that you leased or used, whatever be the case. And that's when you really started kind of ramping up the farmer-florist portion of your business, right? I mean, is that what your real focus was at that point?
Oh, yeah. So I was always 100% growing flowers even from the beginning, but the florist part of it kind of evolved with time. So yep, after I got more land, I really I stopped going to farmers market. So I had done farmers market for 2 years. And then after that, I realized like you can't do farmers markets really and weddings if you're gonna be a small enterprise, because most good farmers markets at least happen on the weekends, and then also weddings happen on the weekends. So I was forced to choose one or the other really. So I went and focused on weddings, and then also workshops came into the mix over time. But yeah, as things evolved, at my peak, I did 72 weddings in one season, which was a lot. And at the time, I didn't have that big of a staff. I still don't have that big of a staff, actually. And so that was me designing all of those. That was me doing lots of planting and weeding, and then also trying to manage the business and all the wedding proposals and all of that. So that's why I'm talking about burning out, is because I definitely hit a burnout wall around 2013, 2014. It was just overwhelming. But I was growing this business. I was growing a brand. I was proving that being a farmer florist is a viable approach, because at that time there weren't that many people doing full on farmer florist enterprises. Maybe they were growing some of the flowers, but then bringing in flowers. And I was trying really hard to just use flowers that I grew myself, and still do that today with our weddings. It's important to me to do that, but it's not everybody has to do that. That's just my approach to it. And yeah, and then I got additional land, and now my farm in 2018, I was able to purchase land right next to where I was already farming. So I purchased 4.25 acres in the city of Philadelphia, which is kind of crazy, but there is that much land, fortunately, still left green and wild a little bit. And it was a huge leap of faith to make that purchase. Way more money than I would ever think I would spend on land, by the way. 4.5 acres in the city. I could have bought like 5,000 acres somewhere else. But it was important to me because I wanted to preserve that green space. And with that purchase, my business evolved. And that's what this whole conversation is about. So my focus evolved from thinking about, I'm a farmer florist, I am producing flowers, to my evolution in my heart and my mind became, I am a steward of land, and I am holding space for other beings and other creatures. And we just happen to farm flowers as a way to pay for all of this. And so I took away my sort of what I considered an extractive mindset, where I was pushing and pushing and pushing to produce as many stems as possible, and instead wanted to produce just enough stems and let the space be free and wild as much as possible. And that was a huge emotional shift for me. That is probably the only reason I'm still in flower farming. I think I might have completely burnt out and walked away if I hadn't made that change for myself. So that's part of my evolution. It's not necessarily going to be everybody's evolution, but it really was a shift for me. Yeah.
But Jennie, I mean, but that's just what is unique to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's what I want people to understand, I think, because I struggle with this. It's like when I do make a change, that is okay. You know, it's like every one of us has different paths, wants, needs, and it changes as you age.
Oh,
I
yeah.
think about 15 years older than you, 15 or 20 years older than you. And it is just so interesting to me how things that were so amazingly important to me in business
Mm.
15 years ago, I don't even give them the time of day now. You know what I mean? It's like I realize that's not really important. And what I want people to understand is that my business, and you can just ask my sister, my business has changed every year
Yeah. Yeah.
somehow, right? I mean,
Yeah,
wouldn't you
yeah,
agree that
mine
that's what it
too. Oh,
takes?
yeah, every year. I mean, sometimes I try to keep it the same out of stubbornness, or like I'm lazy and or not lazy, but I'm just tired and I don't feel like
Right.
making a change. I just want to do it the same way. And then inevitably that always stagnates and I should have made the change. And I'm always glad when I make a change. So yeah, there's such an evolution from how you want to sell flowers and how you want to do the work, and if you want to do the work yourself. There's so many things. It's so many moving parts in a floral business and a flower farm that can change and shift. The one thing I had to come to terms with a few years ago, if there's any like tiny little nugget I can give to anybody listening to this podcast, is that for the longest time, and Lisa, maybe you can attest to this too, I was looking at my flower farm on a season to season basis. I would be like, okay, here we are, it's 2022. This is my crop plan. And okay, that like all success relied on that crop plan panning out, the feeling like my success, like my value was in one season. And it took me many years, honestly. I wish I'd come to this conclusion sooner. But it hit me over the head one day as I was standing in a rainstorm, looking out over my farm, and I realized this is the work of a lifetime. This is not a season's worth of work. And the moment that settled into my heart, everything changed, because I realized it doesn't matter if I succeed with the zinnias this year. It doesn't matter if I book 50 weddings this year. It's like, this is the work of a lifetime. I am not getting it done today. I'm not getting it done tomorrow. In fact, frankly, I'm not getting it done in my lifetime. But
Yeah.
success is not today. It's not even tomorrow. It'll be years in the making. And it's just important to find out what it is that is the work of your lifetime. It's not going to just be flower farming. It's going to have something more emotional and nebulous than I farm flowers. But everybody figures it out for themselves. And when you do, that's the trigger.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I live in 5-year windows for my
Mm,
business,
mm,
and I've done that probably for maybe 15 years now. It's like,
mm.
and I just started another 5-year click.
You did. Ooh, I want to
Yeah,
know more.
and it's like I think to myself, and I cannot remember who the flower farmers were. There was somebody that's retired now.
Hmm.
But I can remember, and it was somebody that wrote for the ASCFG because it was in their quarterly, I think,
Okay.
their
Yeah.
report. And I can remember them saying that at the end of every season, they quit. And then they decide, and they're in a position
Oh, wow.
financially and mentally that if for whatever reason, I mean, it can be anything. It could be health. It could be, a pandemic. It could be
Hmm.
anything that they can say that, all right, our season ends on October 31st. And I think it was something like the 1st of December, they decide whether they're going to do it again next year. I mean, not really, but really. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was
I
like,
wonder if that was Missy up in New Hampshire. I feel like I remember her saying something like that. So it might have been her.
it
Yeah.
could have been. And I didn't decide to do, I mean, it gives me goosebumps talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Me too. I'm
it
kind of like, woo.
totally changed the way that I looked at my business. And,
Mm.
something else that people need to know about you is that you are the breadwinner. You are a one-woman show that puts
Oh,
the
yeah.
bread,
Me.
the bacon on the table, meaning this is Jennie's livelihood. That's
Oh,
not
yeah.
so for me. I have a man that does that, or a
Mm.
husband that helps with that perspective, but that has not affected the way I've attacked business.
Right.
But it takes away a little bit of the from you
Oh,
because
yeah.
my mortgage was paid.
Oh,
anyway.
nice.
You know what I mean?
Mine is me. I'm paying it all. Yeah. So that is
Exactly.
one thing I like to point out to particularly female farmers that are coming into it is that you don't need to have a partner to do this. It's
Exactly.
certainly easier. But yeah, I started flower farming full time right from the beginning. So I quit my fancy corporate job that paid me a lot of money. And I just decided in April one year that this is it. And I quit. I gave my 2 weeks notice and I I started right away after that. And I fully funded the farm 100% off of the farm sales as it goes without any debt. But I do this full time. This is my only gig. And I think personally, another piece of advice if I could give anybody is I think that was the key to my success is actually that I gave it my 100% attention. I hear so many
Yeah.
people that are trying to do this as like a part-time while they're still holding down their other job. And I get it. It's so scary to make that financial leap. But if you do it in a considerate way, like for one, write a business plan. So that's one thing I did do. I wrote a business plan before I quit my corporate job. So I already knew what market potential there was and what my marketing plan would be and what my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats would be and what my ideal customer looked like. So I had all of that mapped out. I was marketing professional first. So that felt very natural to me. But if you do that, and you can see the path forward and you know what your expenses are going to be for the first year and so forth, I really encourage people to go all in. If this is what you're doing, then go all in now. Don't wait, don't putter around with it because you will lose energy, you will divide yourself, you will not succeed. I'm not saying it's impossible, but you're never going to reach the potential if you don't give it
Exactly.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I have this image. I have this image in my mind, Jenny, from you just saying that. It's like imagine a cliff with a
Mm,
valley down below. Just think of one of those beautiful farms down in
mm,
the valley. You know, I think of Shenandoah Valley where I am.
mm.
And I can see you just running and jumping. And then, but the cliff is lined with all those people that are crawling to the edge and just
Yeah.
taking
Hmm.
over. And
And
that
jump.
is really,
Yeah.
you gotta
You
jump.
have to do it. You have to. And it wasn't like I was making that is such a good visual, Lisa. I love that you thought of that because it's kind of how it felt. I mean, it really did feel that way. But I had put a parachute on first. So for the
Yeah,
record, I didn't just leap. I did have a
that's
parachute carefully packed that I knew was going to help me land gently. And there could have been a rough landing, but I still think it would have been the right. In the end, it was a wonderful landing, and I'm so glad that I did it. And I did go ahead of a lot of people that were crawling to get there. And there's a lot of value in that and being one of the first people to really focus in your area, in your region. We talk sometimes about how there are so many new flower farmers right now, but 90% of those new flower farmers are crawling slowly down the cliff. If you take the running leap of faith with your parachute nicely packed in
yeah.
advance, then you are going to be ahead of them and then you're going to gain a lot more market share. You're going to have a real business. You're going to have a business that catches people's attention. You're going to be able to provide good customer service instead of this scattered replying to emails after your 9 to 5 job, after you went out and watered, after you like all the things and you're replying at 11 o'clock at night. It just changes the whole energy about your enterprise. And that's super important to having a really successful business.
That is so true. And, I was just trying to think, I actually can remember posting a saying about you got to jump, you have to have a parachute. And that's
Mhm.
literally the word that I use too. But most often, those of us that have parachutes don't ever really need them. You
Right.
know what I mean? It's like because we have done our homework,
Hmm.
and it's just homework, y'all. It's not a 6-year plan.
Right.
It's you do the homework and then you just have to go for it. I am just so really love that picture of, um, of how I think that I just want to say to people that are afraid to jump, it's like you have to jump to
You
make use
have
of the
to.
parachute, but you're really not
Yeah.
going to probably need it if you've packed your
Right.
parachute.
Right. Exactly. And it is to continue to talk about the evolution of how a business can form and change, because I know, Lisa, for you too, it's happened a lot where maybe you were focused exclusively on growing flowers for a while and you built your business up that way, but there's so many other ways to leverage what you've learned and what you have to offer and to build
Yeah.
community and so forth. So that's why I started teaching a lot more workshops, and then
Yes.
teaching farming workshops, which seems like it could be counter to, like, don't you want to guard your secrets and keep things close? But instead, I'm mentoring, other farmers in my area, to try to build the community around that. So it's to say that for a while, you as a newer business owner out there might feel threatened or anxious. There's a lot of emotions that come from running a business the first decade, I'd say. And then
Yes.
after a decade, it eases up and it's okay. So if you're in your first decade, understand, again, work of a lifetime. Things are going to evolve, things are going to change, and you will feel differently after that. And I just encourage people to kind of open up their ideas for what kind of work they can do through their farms and their businesses. And Lisa, you brought me on to teach online workshops, which I never ever thought in my lifetime I would do. But they've been really rewarding, and it helps me reach so many more people that way. And then I started a podcast, and I never thought I would have a podcast. And now
Yeah.
it's got a whole life. So it's amazing where you can go with a business if you just kind of let it evolve. It's all about evolution, basically.
It is evolution. And I think the thing that the stigma that burned me a little bit during that first decade, as you mentioned, that when you're really concerned about this and that, is when you see a need that you want to change.
Hmm.
It's not that you're saying what you were doing wasn't successful or right,
Right.
and first off, what difference does it make? You're smart enough to recognize it and turn and go the other way.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
regardless of the reason. So let's just talk. I'm just going to list a couple of those things that you just mentioned. So Jennie does do the No-Till Flowers podcast, which is
Hmm.
totally and completely awesome. And I will say, if you have not listened to the tulip talk between her and Dave Dowling, you have not lived yet if you're growing tulips. They will save your butt.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. I mean, so amazing. And so I would say here now, and then I want to just talk about, you've made a major shift in how you farm in the last couple of years. And I want to talk about that. But I would be amiss if I didn't mention that Jennie also does a course with us. She has the Macon Workshops Work for You, which is an amazing on-demand course that can really be a great addition to your business of doing workshops or experiences on your farm. But Jennie also has created a course that we publish called Farmer-Florist School Online. And y'all, just like you're learning here today from Jennie, it is the nitty gritty. It's not about arranging. It does not include any arranging. It's not going to, she does give you, I think, isn't it your top 10 foliages that you grow, top
Yeah,
10 flowers?
there's like growing information in there and lots of inspirational images, but it's not
Right.
like a design course. It's really much
Correct.
more about the back end of doing weddings and events and so
And
forth.
she also shares what maybe you shouldn't grow, what you should look to other growers for. And anyway, so Jennie, you can't, and it's not an open enrollment year round, but you can get on our wait list, and you can find all that over at the Gardener's Workshop. .com. You can find her on-demand course and her farmer florist course. So Jennie, let's talk about this little evolution to kind of wrap this package up about how you have journeying into regenerative farming. Tell us about
Oh,
kind of what
yeah.
that is, and what that is and how that all happened.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, well, to paint the picture more as fully as possible in a few brush strokes, is that I started farming with that traditional farming mentality that I had learned from my own family when I was growing up on a traditional dairy farm. And so I approached flower farming with the same way. I needed to have a tractor and I had a tiller, and I was buying bags of fertilizer, lots of focus on NPK and all of those things. So I was tilling, and really approaching it very conventionally. Though I was always organic, I was never using things that weren't listed as organic, at least. And I thought I was doing a bang up job. But then after 10 years of flower farming, I realized that my soil and my farm were becoming less and less productive. I had a lot of compaction issues, a lot of waterlogged soil. Crops that I had grown in the past that used to grow, like feverfew. That's a great example. I have these pictures of feverfew when I was my first 5 years of growing in this space. And, the feverfew was like above my waist. It was super tall, hundreds of stems coming off of a small patch. And then after 10 years of growing and tilling, I was trying to grow feverfew and it was barely getting knee high, the same varieties, same like everything. Like it was nothing had changed and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And I kept getting more fertilizers and dumping more fertilizer onto my soil because I thought there must be a nutrient deficiency and I just need to get more nitrogen in there. And then in 2018, we had a super wet year here on the East Coast in Philadelphia. It just rained and rained and rained and rained. And there was never a time when the soil dried out enough for me to be able to get on my tractor and go into my field with the tiller like I usually do to break ground for the spring. And so I was forced, without knowing what was about to happen to my whole sort of approach to farming, I was forced to stop tilling. And I read Andrew Medford's book that had just come out at that time about no-till farming. I can't remember the full title, but I got that sort of out of desperation because I was like, okay, I didn't honestly even know what the words like no-till really meant at the time. I just knew that I could not till, so I would have to think of something else. And so I adopted what's called the deep mulch system at my farm in 2018 in the spring. And there was a lot of trial and error. And the season of 2018 was not a bang up year. We made it through. Let's just say that we made it through. That's about all I could ask for. But it was not like this moment of like, oh, my farm is suddenly this perfect, beautiful place again. I've got waist high feverfew. It took many years. But it was that catalyst, that wake up moment that made me start reading about, well, what does tilling do to the soil? Because I read Andrew's book and he was talking in there about why you would go no-till. And that was just the door opened for me in the best possible way. I had just been so tunnel vision for so long that this is the way you farm. You get your tractor, you get your tiller, you go out there. That's what you do. And then I started realizing what it means to consider soil health, soil balance, soil biology. Like there's such life in the ground. And so I would say in about 2019, it really started trucking along my knowledge. I was just reading and consuming books, changed everything about the way I farm. I stopped tilling altogether, haven't tilled since 2018, but it's more than that. It has everything to do with cover cropping and ecosystem management. Just there's so much more than just not tilling.
Right.
That just happened to be the first thing for me. So ever since then, it's been quite a learning journey, and I've had a really amazing time finding a lot more joy in flower farming now since I gave up sort of that mechanized approach and I stopped worrying so much about production and I started looking at the soil first. So I do what I call now soil first flower farming. Um, and from that, there's just been such a regeneration of my farm. The soil that was completely pulverized and beat up from a decade of tilling is now rich, chocolatey, crumbly soil. And after 4 years of no tilling, so this will be our fourth season of no till, production is ramping back up now again. But I do want to say, no till is not an instant, and regenerative practices are not an instant band-aid to fix really tired old soil. It will take several seasons. And that's one of the things in my podcast, No Till Flowers, is like an ongoing conversation about the ins and outs and the complexity of it. But it's really fun. I have to say, Lisa, I love farming now in a way that I never really understood how to love it before. And we share a love of box turtles here, so it's really been my box turtle population. They're a threatened species, and I have mating box turtles on my land, and I really always think of them first, which is a really great sort of checkpoint for thinking about the ecosystem first, and then
Right.
how that spreads out to the rest of the farm and makes the farm so healthy from there. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell. I could probably talk about
What a
that
love
topic for
story.
hours.
What a
Yeah.
great love story.
Yeah.
And don't you find that making a connection with whether it's a creature or a tree or
Mm,
insects or
hmm.
whatever, all of a sudden that does become your first thought now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It changes, really changes everything. And I mean, we are us, old farts are just great examples of how things evolve and how different,
Hmm.
how'd I get here? This is not
Right.
where I thought I was going when I started this whole escapade, however long ago it was.
Right.
Um, so, well, Jennie Love today is, so you still do weddings, right?
We still do weddings right now. That may evolve as well. I've been doing weddings for over for about 12 years now, and it feels like a lot of years of doing weddings. COVID kind of yeah, COVID was a wild ride. Let's just put it that
Yeah.
way. I mean, it was challenging and continues to be challenging. Here we are in the spring of 2022, and I'm still doing weddings that I booked back in 2019. So once we get through that backlog, I'll do probably what you do, Lisa, and have that like little moment where you sit down and you think about the next 5 years and you try to
Yeah.
decide what makes sense. So I couldn't have built the business that I did without weddings. And I think that wedding work and a special event design work is so useful to flower farmers as a way to, fund the evolution of a business that you can purchase a lot more infrastructure for your farm if you're doing high-end wedding, doing high
Yes.
value sort of design work as your value added with your flowers than you could if you just went and sold at farmers markets or did grocery stores. So there's so much reason to do weddings, but will they always be part of Love and Fresh Flowers? I'm not entirely sure yet, but they are for the
Sure.
foreseeable future.
And that's the other, you just said something, and I'll just mention this and then we're going to head off here. But, you know, businesses have seasons too.
Yeah.
I look at, things that we've been really, really successful and allows you to fund other things. That doesn't mean you're going to keep doing it every year, and that's okay too. That's what I feel. I mean, I guess I get so many communications from budding entrepreneurs and flower farmers are one and the same, but not just
Yeah.
flower farmer business people. And they are so questioning, but I spent so long doing this. And here's the
Hmm.
thing that I want to say to people is just because you spent a lot of time making a mistake does not mean that you need to cling to it. Do you
Right.
know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
that. And I understand the investment, the time, your family,
Hmm.
your spouse, perhaps saying, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? You spent
Hmm.
so much time, but it's really
And
okay.
it might not have been a mistake either. For the record,
Exactly.
it's just that chapter is done. And it's
Exactly.
okay. I mean, we as human beings, we have to evolve. Like, just put business aside for a second. I mean, who is the same when they're 22 as they are when they're 42, when they are when they're
Thank goodness.
62?
Thank
Nobody
goodness.
is, right? And nor should your business, nor should be what your everyday life. I mean, business is life for those of us that are entrepreneurs. We
Yeah.
can't separate them. So if you
Yeah.
want evolution in your personal life, then you're going to have evolution in your business life too. So, yeah.
And I think that's going to wrap it up.
Okay. Sounds
All
like a good
right.
way to end.
Yeah, it is. So thank you so much, Jennie Love.
No, thank you, Lisa.
Ciao.
All right, friends. So I hope kind of going along with the journey has helped you to, I mean, first off, just that we all go through the ups and downs, and that's just the way that business is, right? And how things change. I mean, let's talk about Jennie's transformation from being a conventional farmer to a regenerative no-till farmer, and how workshops are now on the forefront of her mind. She still's doing weddings, but it's not what she thought, right? And it's different for every single person, for every single business. And friends, take a look back over how did you get here? I often think of that, and nobody could have ever forecasted, right, where we are today when we look back. So, friends, if you want to learn more about Jennie, I'll have all of her connections down below, her social media and her website. She has a couple of online courses with us. Farmer-Florist School Online, which is not an arranging course at all. It is all business, friends. All business, from contracts and pricing equations to her top crops to grow and the top crops to source from other growers, and just it's packed. So I'll put the link to that, as well as her on-demand course, Making Workshops Work for You. As Jennie shared in a previous episode, workshops dollar for dollar are the most profitable thing that she does. And you can learn how she does it. And again, it's all the business, y'all. It's the part that nobody ever tells you, from someone that's doing it very successfully. So I'll put all those links. And as always, friends, I just love that you stopped in for a listen. And till we meet again, friends, ciao.